If you wake up from a half dream, you're still wearing a hat. How can you know you're really awake?
Oh yeah, this is a live ambient field recording from the yard of the illustrious manor.
Yes, this is our soft open. Mm-hmm. We're soft, we're open.
Oh yeah.
Openly soft.
And speaking of soft openings.
Yes. Let's get right to it, shall we?
Yeah.
This is the Seething Clutch Yardcast. I am your guest host, Lance Blastoff.
And I'm your regular host, who you all know and love.
Yeah, we do.
And we're here in the yard.
You're in the yard.
And today...
Feels like a prison. It's like a prison thing. You're like, oh, all right, spent some time in the yard.
In a way it is. Because we will be discussing some great works of literature from the turn of the century.
Not this most recent century, which I'm really happy that we've lived through a period where we could say the aughts, back in aught 4 or whatever.
We ought to be able to.
We ought to be. The previous aughts. So for those of you listening 3,000 years in the future, we're talking about the beginning of the 20th century, 1900s.
1900s through 19 teens.
19 teens?
Yeah.
This is a mic check, isn't it? Teens, 19 teens, teens, sibilants. No, I think it's good. The tribble is staring at me.
Yeah, and the teen tribalism is a bit wrought with this episode, you might say.
There's a windscreen on our mic that looks like a very posh tribble. Like it's kind of like a Beverly Hills tribble.
Yeah.
Soft gray, downy kind of. Anyway, that's the tribble we're referring to.
Yes.
What we're really here to talk about is the works of the great Winsor McCay. One of the, I guess really one of the original newspaper cartoonists, in a way. I mean, if you think, this strip that we're going to look at is from 1905. I feel like the original newspaper comic strips, widely considered to start with Outcault's The Yellow Kid.
Right.
And I have not looked it up in a minute, but I feel like that was in the 1890s sometime, maybe a little earlier.
That sounds right to me. I also have not bothered to do appropriate research for this.
Yeah, I mean that's for losers. But,
losers who like to know what they're talking about.
Yeah, like I said, losers. You could just shorten that.
Yeah.
Shorten it right to losers. It's in that vicinity somewhere. It was Richard Outcault, right? See, now this is what we're not looking at Wikipedia while we're doing this. I mean, I did 5 minutes ago, but no.
Okay.
No. But no, I think Richard Outcault, if I'm remembering his name correctly, was the creator of The Yellow Kid, as well as several other early newspaper comic strips. And I do believe it was in the 1890s. It could be a little earlier, but it's not going to be much earlier than 1905. So I think we could say that Winsor McCay was one of the original...
One of the first wave.
The first wave, definitely first wave.
And also, I would just like to add, not even first wave, but probably proto-surrealist as well. I mean, that movement really didn't get going until after this strip was published, or at least was codified as such. Although, as far as I know, he never explicitly referenced the Jungian dream psychology that was all hip at that time.
Right.
it seems that it was a clear influence on him in some way.
Yeah, if it wasn't, then it was one of those weird kind of serendipity things where it's like what he was doing was running along that same track at the same kind of time.
And to be fair, you know, it was so popular at that time that could easily have been a subconscious reference. Where he was,
which is subconscious reference to the subconscious.
Exactly. A hat on a hat.
Yes.
In your fucking hat dream.
And if you wake up from a hat dream and you're still wearing a hat, how can you know you're really awake? I think we sort of skipped over it. So we mentioned that we were looking at the works of Winsor McCay. We're specifically looking at Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend. Winsor McCay is probably best known for Little Nemo in Slumberland, which is one of the just cornerstone pieces of cartooning. You know.
Absolutely. I mean,
and it deals with similar subject matter.
Yes
to an
and
extent.
No. Although the first appearance of Nemo was in a Rarebit Fiend strip, and they later gave him his own strip.
So he was kind of like Mork from Ork.
Exactly.
Yeah. He was like, or Laverne and or Shirley.
Yeah.
Somebody who spun off from Happy Days.
Yeah. Those pre-World War II happy days.
Yes, and they are here again.
Yeah.
There was a theme running through it. So for those who are not familiar with Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, it was an early comic strip by Winsor McCay. Did it run daily? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I want to say it was weekly, but I am really not sure.
I know it says in the volume that we have a book, a compiled edition of the Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, and it's
a Dover edition. I believe it's from the 70s, like late 70s.
That sounds right. And it was a reprint, it seems like, with additional text. There's a publisher's note which tells a lot about Windsor's life and career, and a little bit about the genesis of the Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend and its spin-offs, which included a film, like a short silent film, and also a musical piece. But these are kind of detailed in the opening introduction, which I don't think was part of the original compendium. Once it gets in there a little bit, you can see that the strips have been collected, and there was a volume of the collected strips, which was published much earlier, closer to the time of the original publication, which starts with its own intro, which is definitely different in style and content than the introduction. But Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, and I think the point I was trying to make there is I'm sure it says in that introduction somewhere where there was a daily strip or a weekly strip, and I know I read that, and I don't remember if it is, but it was a very regularly published thing. Now, Little Nemo in Slumberland, which some of you listening may be more familiar with that work, was a continuous strip. It was also at least ostensibly aimed at children. You could argue that it wasn't really aimed at the market for children.
It was a little overcomplicated for young children, at least.
But the protagonist, Nemo, is a child, and the dreams, it deals with dreams, as does Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, oddly enough. The dreams of Nemo are more childlike dreams.
Fantastical. That's the way I did describe it. And but still almost more in a Lewis Carroll type of adult elements, a lot of complexity that you wouldn't assume a young child would grasp, but I grew up with that shit, and
I grew up
on
with
some level
shit.
You do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways that sometimes people underestimate children in that way. But yeah, it's oriented towards being in a dream world that is created by a child, and it's a continuing story. So you have, you have a continuing narrative throughout Nemo's adventures. The Rarebit Fiend, on the other hand, is one and done. You have a daily strip. It's self-contained. One of the things I was most, and I've seen some of these before, but I've never read through a whole volume of them collected, and I think this is pretty complete. I think there maybe all but one or two. I think they mentioned in the introduction that there's one toward the very end, and I'm very intrigued by this.
Me too. I know what you're talking about.
That they left out because it might be controversial or might be seen in a different light through today's eyes or something. I forget how they put it.
I would like to call your attention to page 4.
Yes.
In terms of what the fuck is in the strip they left out.
Yes.
Because
and like you were saying, you knew where I was going with that. I know where you were going with this, because I had the same thing. I didn't read that part of the introduction until I had read several of the strips, and this is very early. This is page 4, and I think they're in chronological order, so it's one of the earliest strips. He has the protagonist in this one has a dream that, looking at it with our eyes today, we could say there are some problematic elements, perhaps. Problematic, perhaps. Also, as a side note, one of the things it talks about when it's talking about his career, there's a strip that is earlier than both of these, which is called Jungle Imps. I'm not familiar with it, and I didn't look it up to see what it actually is. It did say that some of the characters or artistic styles or thematic elements of that strip made its way into his later work, so I'm guessing this strip from Rarebit Fiend maybe incorporates elements from Jungle Imps. Basically, this one involves a dream. So, backing up just a little bit, like we said, these are self-contained, unlike Nemo. So every strip is just one page.
8 panels.
Usually 8 panels. And one thing that did strike me, and I think I was starting to say this before we round around to this, was that unlike a lot of comic strips or gags or jokes or whatever, where the punchline is what makes it unique, the punchline for every strip of Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend is always the same.
I love that about it. The punchline is not a punchline. It is all about the situation and the setup.
Yeah, I mean, they phrase it a little different. There's sometimes some little twists or whatever, but basically the punchline is always the person waking up from the dream and being, why did I have such a crazy dream? It must have been because I ate that rarebit and I'm never eating it again or whatever.
Right.
Like, oh, what horrible dreams these rarebits induce or whatever. But it's always that.
Yeah. Apparently, cheese toast was the 1900s equivalent of
acid. I took so much acid before I went to sleep. That is a trope that I see a lot in popular fiction, especially from a certain era. This being part of that era, that eating certain things before going to bed just makes you have crazy dreams, and I don't know that I've ever necessarily experienced that. I mean, I've eaten some crazy shit and I've had some crazy dreams. I've not noticed them lining up necessarily.
Likewise. However, I did a little bit of research about that, and apparently his original theme had been about addiction, specifically tobacco and alcohol. However, the publishers asked him to make it about Rarebit, and that was also a bit of a reference to, there had been some popular English novels, or I don't know if they were novels, some sort of published British literature at the time about how eating lobster and rarebit before bed would give one nightmares. And Yeah, fuck. I feel like I wish I had the references right now for that. But I think it's just the general idea of excessively rich food before bed will fuck you up.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in like your Looney Tunes, like a lot of those cartoons, especially the older ones, or Popeye, the Max Fleischer cartoons and things like that. Old timey, somewhat old timey cartoons.
Pre-Gaslight era.
Yes. And I know I'm getting farther and farther away from what this particular strip is.
Back to the racism.
But, yeah, let's get back to the racism, and then we'll go on to the next tangent. So this particular strip. So like we said, every strip is 8 panels, 1 page, ends with the person waking up from the dream. The rest of the panels are all the dream. So you get a little dream sequence punctuated by like, why did I eat Rarebit? My dreams are crazy. You know, it's almost like the counsel for, some kind of counsel for like demonizing Rarebit. Was like, it's like, instead of milk does a body good, they're all, Rarebit gives you crazy dreams. Stay off the bit, kids.
Want a bit of bit, mate?
I want a bit of bit. No bit for me. I'm off it. I've gone off it.
Gone off the bit.
I've gone off the
makes
bit.
Me have these fucked up racist dreams about how I get my fucking comeuppance as a colonizer for trying to be a missionary.
Right. Which is interesting. So now about this strip. So what happens in this? It starts with this kind of like older looking, I'm the Monopoly guy with a monocle and a top hat, like upper crusty rich guy, snooty white person walking, and he's talking about that his ambition in life, which is about to be realized, is to become a missionary. And the way he characterizes being a missionary is to teach the heathen, to help the savage. I'm going to scatter enlightenment, among uncivilized people. In short order, he meets some of these so-called savages that he's intending to enlighten. And here's the part that, looks just blatantly racist to me, is the way the natives are drawn. I mean, he's obviously somewhere in Africa. It kind of looks like when you see drawings of people in blackface.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like just those kind of drawings that would accompany a blackface performance.
And his brilliantly minimalistic line work, like, really emphasizes that, unfortunately.
Right. It really sells the racism.
I mean, quite often I am in awe of how much emotion and dynamism he can portray with such minimal and clear line work. However, in this context,
right.
Ouch.
Now, that said,
and to be fair, these are, what we're looking at is a Dover publication that is less than a quarter of the size of what the original print was.
Right. These are huge, right? Yeah. These are the fold-out page of the Sunday whatever.
Right. So we're seeing this incredibly reduced.
Yeah.
Which makes the line work and the overt racism all the more obvious.
So, I read a little bit online, and I read a little bit of what's in the introduction and stuff, and there's not a lot about his personal politics. There is some note that he was paid to do political cartoons from time to time, and it seems like he started out doing pro-Republican cartoons, which either sang the praises of the Republican Party or demonized the Democrats. But he later flipped and did the exact same thing for the Democrats. I think they paid him more just to do so. I think in terms of the politics in his cartooning, it was just making a buck.
Yeah,
it didn't seem like his personal politics was spilling over into it too much. Whoever was going to give him the money to be like, hey, the Democrats are idiots. Well, he'd be like, okay, I'm cashing that check. You know? Oh, you know who are idiots this week? The Republicans, because the Democrats wrote the check. So I don't know how much.
I don't think much of this really has much to do with his personal feelings or politics, because it's not a very common thing in his work, and at that time this was the ubiquitous shorthand, unfortunately.
Right. And I think that's the impression I get, and I'm not going to try to make excuses for him.
No, I mean, who knows? I have no idea.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe he was a horrible human being. I have not looked into that, but I see nothing here other than an unfortunate illustrative shorthand.
Yes, and sign of the times. And to counter that, the actual content of the strip is, okay, so this guy comes in as a missionary. As soon as he encounters the natives that he's supposed to be enlightening, as he puts it, they descend upon him, and they're very well spoken.
More well spoken than him, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and I think to the extent that it's intentional.
Absolutely.
That's part of, even if it's just part of the gag, it may not be a point of view, but it's just part of the joke, maybe. Like, these people that he thinks are savages are fairly eloquent, and he's not.
Yeah. And he's not eloquent enough to notice it. Right.
Yeah, he's not even aware that they're at least as intelligent and educated as he is. They start sizing him up.
The one in the third panel smoking the pipe like an English gentleman.
Right.
While he's sitting there all, I shall not detain you but a minute.
Yeah, they're very... so they accost him basically as meat. Now, here, kind of sideline, that's like another thing that kind of comes into like racist territory, I think, is that, that like depiction of people from the African continent being cannibals, that kind of thing. But at the same time, this guy who's like, I'm going to spread my enlightenment among them, they're very pragmatic, and they're like, oh, and they start trying to claim ownership of him. As the first person to see him was like, you're mine, you belong to me now, you're my meal ticket, you are meat. And he's going on, yammering on about how he's going to try to bring them wisdom or something, and the next guy who comes in cuts him off, and he's like, I know all about that, old man, but I'm a meat inspector, and a little confab with you is desired down at the abattoir immediately. So this first person has claimed him, and the meat inspector comes to kind of do an appraisal. So he comes down to just being
I would like to point out that, like, the concept of the meat inspector, I really love that. Like, the idea that they are not only not savages, but so mired in the nuance of European bureaucracy that they have a meat inspector to dole out the meat to, like...
This guy can't just come and claim him and then say, well, I'm gonna fry him up and let's all have a nice dinner. He's got to be inspected, and then you've got people kind of bickering about the bartering about the price. They're like, well, he's awful tough, I'll give you 9 cents a pound, and the other person's like, no, I'll only give you 8 cents a pound. So I think this might be me wanting to read this into it, but I feel like there's a little bit of just, this like staid old, like British looking, although Winsor McCay was American, wasn't he? Yeah, so this who knows. But British looking kind of old timey white stick in the mud guy, he goes in thinking that he's superior, and he ends up as meat. Mm-hmm. And of course it ends up to be a dream produced by the Rarebit. And we were talking, I know when we started looking at this book, and obviously this strip was one of the ones that kind of jumped out at us, like, wow, there's just so much. I hate to go with the trendy terms, but when people are like, there's so much to unpack here, there's really so much to unpack here with this one.
There really is. Like, as we went over the problematic illustrations, but then the narrative, like, it's pretty astute in terms of its flipping the script and kind of calling out the ubiquitous racism, like the unstated racism of the time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things where, like, you know, you exist in the time you exist in the paradigm you're in. So even when you're calling something out, you know, there's other aspects of it that maybe you don't even question. Like, he may have been trying to, you know, make at least sort of a point with this. At least he's calling out that, like, this superior attitude of these kind of, like, you know, European descended people or whatever. But in doing so, he's, like, drawing a bunch of, like, I guess what you would call, like, you know, pickaninny caricatures.
Yeah.
You know. So he's stuck in it, but he's also a little bit aware of it. I feel that way sometimes when I watch, like, 70s sitcoms. Like, 70s sitcoms were big on, we're really going to try to attack the social issues of the day. We're really going to try to push for things. We're going to try to push forward. And, you know, inevitably, if you look at it, like, a few decades later, you're like, oh, you know, I can see where they didn't even notice that they were still kind of stuck in this thing.
Well, I mean, because the fact that we're even seeing it, like, proves that they were working within the established system.
Right.
You know, that it had a broad enough publication for us to be talking about it now.
Yeah.
You know, means that they were still within that system, that was their language. Like, as shitty and oppressive as it was, they were trying to, you know, they were chipping away.
Right, exactly. And so I think sometimes you lose sight of that when you look at some of these things where you're like, these people are really, and I don't know if this is the case with Winsor McCay. I mean, this is kind of scant evidence to go on.
Right, yeah,
but
absolutely.
in the case of, like, the 70s sitcoms and things like that, which I was a little more familiar with or seen a lot more of, it's like, they were definitely making a concerted effort to, like, make progress.
Right.
But they were where they were and they were when they were. You know, and they were working within the mainstream system. I mean, obviously, you have 3 networks, you know, commercial television, like, it's not the most radical, you know, I know Norman Lear probably wanted to come in guns a-blazing, but, you know, they're probably like, maybe.
Yeah, that ship got a lot of captains.
Yes. So, but there is that. So that's probably the most maybe controversial strip in the book from our perspective for seeing it. But and then, like we said in the introduction, it mentions that there's one strip. I think it may be the very last strip that was produced. It could be wrong, but it's definitely later. Where they're like, we didn't include this one because, you know, looked at through today's lens or something. They put it sort of that way. It was like, it just wouldn't, you know, like, basically, I think they were just saying it'd just be too offensive.
And let's keep in mind, when they say looked at by today's lens, we are talking about 1973.
Right, not today.
Right,
Time of publication.
1973.
So as progressive as
civil rights movement was still nascent. Active. Yeah. Like, not nascent. I mean,
no, nascent
like,
might be pushing it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. MLK had been assassinated already. True. Like, shit was getting real. But, yeah.
It was in progress.
Yeah.
It wasn't like...
Problematic by 1973 standards is nothing compared to today's standards.
Right, yeah, that's good. So, yeah, something that they would think was too problematic to print in 1973, considering that they were okay with printing this one
I don't know.
I would like to see what it is.
It could be a content issue because this one, although like I said, some of the illustration and like the shorthand choices are problematic, I feel the general tone and message is still fairly progressive.
I agree, yeah. And yeah, so you could be right. Maybe the other one, the content was the
not
problem.
cool. Yeah.
It was. If you're looking at style and substance, we're like, well, this one, the style's a little off-putting, but the substance might be all right.
Yeah.
The substance of the other one, maybe not.
Yeah.
I did get sidetracked. Well, I got sidetracked on the way to this by an idea, and I was starting to move toward it, and then I realized I was getting too far away from this one, so circle back the wagons again. One of the things I was most interested about when we started looking at this was Rarebit itself.
Right.
I wasn't super. I had heard the term a lot, and also being comic book dork, as we both are, and grown up with comics, and I think most people who are kind of like geeks about this kind of thing will say that they enjoy reading about the thing they love or learning stuff about the thing they love as much as actually consuming it. I mean, the comic books and comic strips themselves are reading material. But I feel like as a kid, first discovering them, like I spent probably nearly as much time reading about comic books as I did reading comic books, and that kind of carried over through a lot of interest in life, where some people like, they love music, they listen to music, but they don't care anything about it except listening to it. Whereas like I'll read about musicians I don't give two shits about, just to see what's kind of interesting stories they have or whatever. So I read a lot about comic books, and there were certain things that like maybe I didn't see for years or even decades after reading about them. And I think Nemo first, and then more so Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, were kind of in that group for me. Like I read, in reading histories of comics, like I'd read about Winsor McCay, I'd read about especially Little Nemo in Slumberland, and then you would hear the name of this strip would come up because it's probably his second most well-known work.
I think so. I mean, yeah.
But it was a long time from when I heard about it to when I actually saw it, and the title sounds really fantastical to me, especially growing up with comic books in a primarily like adventure format.
Right.
You have like superheroes as the big, most like commercially viable genre, which is until recently, now that it's like the huge movie genre or whatever, but until recently comic books was the only place that was the case. You were like, superheroes is like a weird like subgenre of a subgenre. It's like sort of science fiction, and it's sort of heroic adventure fiction or whatever, but it's like this really small little niche. And again, until recently, in every other media, I mean, it was not even a factor. But in comic books, for decades upon decades, like superheroes, they owned it. Like comic books, like some people just thought superheroes were comic books.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, pretty much from the 60s on, that was the general consensus. Like, superheroes are comic books.
Yeah, because it just dominated. So you're like, if you did a
if
comic
it's
book
not
about
Archie,
something
it's
else,
a superhero.
Right, exactly. It's Archie or superheroes, and that's it. But so the as a young comic book fan, like superheroes loom so huge, and then all kinds of like adventure fiction, science fiction, stuff like that. Similar genres are kind of along it. So that sort of grandiosity is kind of built into everything, like you got the Stan Lee voice, like where, you're like, forsooth, true believer, upon the benighted hill stands a figure, so when I hear Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, it just sounds like such a mythical, like weird thing, and you're like, what what is this? Who is this Rarebit Fiend? And like just the thought of like rarity, like scarcity or specialness, and it's like in dreams it gives you the fantastical, and it's like very pedestrian as far as Rarebit being a food dish.
Yeah,
and they're just
we
like,
grew up
we're a
in an
feed.
era where, like, I've never had rabbit. Have you had rabbit?
I don't think I've ever had it, and I had to look up again. I was like, man, I've just obviously since then I've I've heard it in conversation enough things to know it's food. I thought it was a meat dish. I couldn't remember what it was exactly, so when we looked up, and for those of you who are maybe similarly confused, it's a dish that consists mostly of bread with cheese on it, melted cheese.
Yeah,
the cheese can have...
It's seasoned cheese.
Seasoned.
It's basically cheese toast, but the cheese is melted with mustard and other spices to make it extra rich and creamy.
Yeah, and very sticky, apparently.
Yeah, according to this strip.
Yes, according to this one especially. And then ale sometimes.
Yes,
they're
ale.
like mixing an ale into it.
Be a common component.
So that it was pretty interesting to me to see what it was, and also that the term derives from originally Welsh rarebit was Welsh rabbit, and rarebit was kind of a bastardization of that. And that led to some of the confusion that maybe it was a meat dish, specifically a rabbit dish, but it has never had rabbit in it, and it's never had any meat in it as far as I know, unless maybe in some instances they mix it in the seasonings.
Is this getting more problematic now? It's like, is this some sort of like, Welsh are so stupid they don't know what rabbits are kind of thing?
I actually think I couldn't find any verification of that, but I think that might be part of it. I think it might be pejorative in the sense that because there was, there are other things that I guess like mock turtle soup doesn't have turtle in it,
or mock.
Or mock. There's no mock in it. So there's some precedent for that kind of thing. But the Welsh rabbit was the original term, and then it became Welsh rarebit. Some people apparently didn't like the change of the term because I guess the reasoning in some people's minds for changing the term was because there was no rabbit in it. They were going to change the name to something similar, and they were like, you don't have to do that. People are going to know there's not rabbit in it. I don't know how they're expected to know, but they're like, it doesn't have to have rabbit in it to have rabbit in the name. I'm like, all right, fair enough.
I guess.
But I did think that, because I don't think it's a Welsh dish either.
No, I don't think it is either.
So I think the fact that it's Welsh rabbit it's a little twist of the knife. It's a little poke. It's like, or maybe it's supposed to be that they're so stupid they don't know what a rabbit is, or maybe they're so poor that instead of a fine feast of rabbit, you got bread with cheese on it. I don't know.
I don't know. Rabbits, they breed like rabbits. They're just running around the yard. You can go shoot them. Like, cheese takes some effort, and
That's
so does
true.
bread. Like, I don't think it's a so poor thing. I think it's a so stupid thing.
Although meat did used to be more for the upper classes. Like, it was more expensive. It was harder to come by. I don't know about rabbits.
Yeah.
Maybe rabbit was not in that group.
Rabbit does not seem like it has ever been an upper class dish. I could be wrong, but
people seem to sort of regard it that way. Like, it's weird. It's like when you think of like meats, like animal meats, you got like beef, pork, chicken, like very common.
They talk that way about duck too, and ducks aren't rare. Like, rarity has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. So it's not a rare bit in any case.
It's a common bit.
Yes, a common bit. So more questions than answers about the name, really. But I thought that little rarebit hole was a fun one to go down, because I was like, what is this? Where does this name come from? And there's, in part of the introduction in here, So, like we said, there was the quote-unquote modern introduction, which is really from 1973, because that's when the modern version was produced.
For our
Past
purposes.
for our forensics, and but past that, there is a short one-page introduction from the original collection of the strips. And you can see by the typefaces and the way things are worded that it's like it's older, and it's a lot of tongue-in-cheek. Like your first part talks about the strip itself. You hear a little bit about Winsor, and then there's Rarebit symbolism, which talks about why Rarebit is such a thing to conjure images. That is attributed to a Randolph C. Lewis. I don't know. Do you know who Randolph C. Lewis is, or if that's a real person? Each of these bits is actually attributed to somebody. The second one is on the history of the Welsh rabbit.
By TV Manly.
I think that answers that one. I was reading that as Hanley, but I think that is maybe a TB Manly. TB Manly! And then the second is concerning the symptoms, which is probably your psychotropic and dream-inducing symptoms of the rarebit by a John W. Harrington. On the history of the Welsh rabbit, I think is the one that seems the most tongue-in-cheek. There's a part here where it says, the origin of the Welsh rabbit is so ancient that in tracing it we cross the boundary of authentic history into the territory of legend. By some it is asserted that it was an ancient druidical conception. Members of this faction going so far as to say they have, in spirit, participated at sacrifices in the ceremonies of which it played an important part. I'm pretty sure this whole collection
sounds
of
like something you would recite at a frat hazing.
Right. Some of the extra bonus shit that Alan Moore puts on things, like when he's doing League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or something. He's like, on the symptoms of opium consumption and the treatises therein, or whatever. It's like.
Whereas you could just say, fucking alcoholism, am I right?
Am I right? It's true. But yes, I doubt that anyone really asserts the Druids were responsible for the rarebit. It does decry. Decry. You hear that? I'm buying into this.
It doth decry.
It decries the use of the rarebit. So it says here, it should be made plain that we are to treat of the Welsh rabbit, not the Welsh rarebit, or the Rarebit, or the rare-a-bit, or anything else that has more than one R to its name. So I think we can conclude that is tongue in cheese tangled cheek.
Oh yes, I think TB Manly had his tongue planted firmly in his cheek.
In his manly cheek.
His manly cheek.
I don't know if you want to look and try to go through some of the actual scripts. The dreams are very... maybe if you want to take a look and see which ones kind of stick out to you. I started to find
these kind of stick out to me.
Yeah, there you go. Here are all these ones that I just opened to. Actually, these are really funny.
Yeah, they're pretty good. It's been a while since I read this. It's fresher in your mind than mine. But I remember I love this one.
Yeah. So this one begins with a couple, and they're kind of considering a dog that apparently it looks like the man came across him. Yeah. And they're just admiring him,
A puppy, really.
A puppy. It's a little puppy.
Yeah.
And they're, the woman is saying, "Oh, isn't he a beauty? Where did you get him? He's sweet as can be." And the man is like, "Ain't he though? He's a beaut, full blood thoroughbred, blah blah blah." Now the very next panel, he's older. It doesn't look like he's a lot older. Doesn't look like a very old dog.
No, he's still puppy. Like I love how he the attention to detail with the large paws.
Yeah.
To show that stage of development, and the large head, and also the beginning of horns.
Right, just little tiny stubs there. But without seeing the rest of the strip, you'd probably just assume, okay, this is a slightly larger puppy. Maybe not
perhaps
even
a bit
full-grown.
mangy.
Maybe mangy, a little mangy, but not terribly.
Right, and that little tongue sticking out definitely reads puppy. It's in that playful stage, like those big paws and waggy tongue. Like.
But then the couple have just tired of him, though. This is like the second panel, and maybe not even out of puppyhood. This old thing is no good. I thought he'd turn out better. He's a bum. And the woman is just like, get some poison. We'll put him out of his misery. Like, she's just like, what is he, like 4 months old? She's ready to just kill him.
Yeah.
And in the third panel, he is nearly as large as they are. And the horns are apparent now. He is definitely growing horns. Devilish horns.
Yeah.
But they apparently did poison him, and it didn't work. And so
I love that he ate all of the poison. I'll have to shoot him.
Oh, he looks so pitiful. It's a shame. Okay, and I think maybe the woman's starting to have second thoughts. Like, she was the first one to be like, get the poison out.
Yeah.
She was just going right for it. But in the second one, the fourth one. Now he is larger than them. He's like head and shoulders larger than them. Definite, like almost like minotaur horns. Like I don't know if you would characterize this as a dog anymore. Some kind of devil beast. But the man has gotten the shotgun, and there's smoke coming out of it. I don't know if he's fired any shots yet. It kind of looks like maybe he has, because I see, do those look like bullet holes or bullets?
Yeah, those dots on them, I'm assuming those are bullet holes because they weren't there before.
And she says, oh, but he looks so pleading, you can't kill him, it's too bad, or
oh, it's too bad you can't kill him.
Oh, no,
like,
all right, okay.
Very clear.
Sorry, I read that totally the wrong way. Oh, but is that a period or is that not a period? It's too bad. It
might be a period. That's one of the problems I will point out here. Winsor McCay's illustration and artwork. I mean, of course, the backgrounds and Little Nemo.
Hi.
Oh.
Speaking of big, wonderful dogs.
Yes.
Here's Rocco. Hi, Rocco.
Rocco has joined our yard cast. He's not as big as the puppy in the strip we're discussing, but he's pretty big.
And he doesn't have visible horns, but they might exist on the astral plane.
Yeah. Oh, astral horns.
But ain't nobody pulling a
nobody's trying
mallet
to poison him or fucking shoot him with a shotgun like they are in this comic strip.
No, because these people are monsters.
Yeah. As were all white people in the turn of the 20th century.
Yes, exactly. And most of them now.
Yeah.
Maybe
to be
fair, maybe including us, but we're the ones talking, so we'll give ourselves a pass for now. Now in the next one, he's really huge, but he seems to be sleeping.
Sorry, before the Rocco thing, I just wanted, what I was trying to comment on was, as great as his illustration and line work and like providing so much depth and emotion and detail with such minimalist and clear line work and almost no backgrounds in this as opposed to Little Nemo.
Yeah, Nemo's a really intricate, crazy background.
Yeah.
This is sometimes almost always no background.
Right.
Very minimal.
However, in this, Winsor McCay did his own lettering. And he is very bad at that.
Yeah, not so good at the lettering.
Especially in these super reduced forms that we're looking at here. Like, it can be a little difficult to read at times.
No. So, like, the blurb that we're looking at, for instance, says, he looks so pleading, period. There's definitely a period there.
Mm-hmm.
It's too bad, maybe a period. You can't kill him, period. Now, whether that period's there or not changes the whole meaning of that blurb.
Yeah.
It's either like, he looks so pleading, it's too bad, you can't kill him, like imploring him, don't kill this dog, or whatever it is. Or it could just be, it's too bad you can't kill him.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's a damn shame you can't kill this thing.
The more I look at it, I think that is a period, but it really should read as a comma based on the illustration it's connected to.
Right. Yeah. Although it's weird that he looks so pleading seems to argue for the former, the like, I don't want you to kill him. But
keep in mind that pleading is hyphenated after the D and broken down to the next line.
Right.
And
because he's so good at lettering.
Somewhat aligned to the left, but alignment is not a word I would use here.
No.
Yeah, it's...
on one hand, I can read all his lettering, so
yeah,
it's better than some people. It's probably better than I could do. I'm no letterer.
I could do that, but also, as we mentioned at the beginning, he was inventing the form as he went along.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, this is
no
not...
fault of him. There was not really an established form of how you letter comic strips for him to look at and try to emulate. Whereas with his illustration, he clearly had honed his craft and observed and worked with other people.
Yeah, that's true. This is definitely it's a new art form at the time, and the lettering, especially, that's one of the tropes, or not the tropes, but one of the mechanics of like comic strips and comic books. There's sort of an entirely new creation with them was the way they read, the way thought balloons are different than speaking balloons.
Yeah.
You're like the way an indicator would go to the person speaking. That this is all stuff. As far as I know, I don't remember any real antecedent of those.
No,
before
and
comics.
That comes after this. This predates that. Everything in here is essentially a narrative word balloon. The idea of thought balloons, as far as I know, had not been introduced by anyone at the time that this was constructed. You can see on this next page, this has no clear denunciation of who is speaking as far as a line coming from the bubble.
No.
However, other than that, it is... There's no way to discern it from any of the other narrative bubbles, which are essentially thought bubbles, as these are dreams.
Right.
So it's hard to tell.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I definitely don't see any thought bubbles occurring in this that I remember.
No.
So I don't know. That'd be interesting to know who started who put the bump and the bump shabomp with that. Like, who started the thought bubbles, and that's different than.
That might be a subject for the next time you're on this podcast.
That's different. I'll start doing some research on that, and we'll. So this kind of goes on. Like, he gets more and more fantastical looking, and they keep trying to kill him, and it's not working, which is good because they're horrible for trying to do that. And of course, it just ends with the usual. Although here's one of the little twists on the punchline, which, as we said, is essentially always the same. In this one, the husband is the one who is having the dream. That varies a lot. Sometimes they throw you a little curveball where it looks like, because the nightmare aspect of it seems to be happening to one person, you think that person's having the dream. And then when they do the wake up reveal, maybe it's like the husband was the one getting tortured in the dream, but it was the wife having the dream. Like, they were like, oh, I'm so glad he got home before,
Yeah, some of those are some of my favorites, actually.
There's a little twist, but again, essentially the same. But the twist here is that they do have a dog, a young puppy, and the dog is on the bed with them.
Yeah. The dog looks exactly like the dog in the first panel.
Yeah, so maybe they're having an anxiety dream. This is another thing. I'm glad you said fantastical way back at the beginning when we were talking about Nemo versus the Rarebit Fiend. and we're saying how this is mostly adults having the dreams, and Nemo, of course, is a little boy, and he's having kind of more childlike dreams, or as you said, fantastical, which I think is a better way to describe it. One thing, even though there are fantastical elements throughout this, one thing that really strikes me about his depiction of adult dreams versus what he later shows for childish dreams is how mundane they are.
Yeah, these are very heavily rooted in the mundanity of their time. Like, I mean, it gets, I don't know if political is the right word, but it definitely deals with the social issues of the era. Like I mentioned at the beginning, how he originally was focusing on tobacco addiction, and alcohol addiction comes up a lot in here, and that was around the time of the temperance movement, maybe even a little before. But clearly these issues involving, the notion of tobacco and alcohol being scourges of society, and like you mentioned, that I didn't notice that he had done a lot of work for the Republican Party, which I don't know how conservative they were at the time.
Right,
because that's but he clearly felt some sort of personal connection to a fairly conservative ideal in terms of the use of any sort of mind-altering substances, which at the time, tobacco and alcohol were the big thing. Like, if he had been working in the 60s, he probably would have been talking about marijuana and LSD, but...
As opposed to melted cheese.
Yeah, exactly.
He's really coming down hard on that, like, melted cheese scene. You don't want to get mixed up in that, kids. Stay away from the Rarebit.
That cheese fucked you up, son. That cheese fucked you up, son. That cheese fucked you up, son.
Yes, that cheese fuck you up, son. If you want a takeaway from our little podcast here, that cheese fuck you up, son.
For more information about how cheese will fuck you up, we will have notes about the vegan lifestyle in the description below.
And how it will prevent you from having racist dreams, or dreams about trying to kill your dog, which is a terrible thing to do. So maybe go vegan, huh? Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, that's all we're trying to say.
That's what we're trying to say. Go vegan because the cheese will fuck you up, son. I don't care how many R's you got in your name.
And on that note, we're going to take a quick break, do a little word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Do you love fashion? Do you love fuckery? Do you love fashion fuckery? Do you want clothes that we get you blackballed from the country club that you don't fucking belong to because you're already a loser? Go to seethingclutch.threadless.com to get clothes that will ask the burning question, why are you all so fuck? Oh, seethingclutch.threadless.com.
And we're back. So a special guest,
Lance Blastoff,
and we are discussing Winsor McCay's Dream of the Rarebit Fiend from the turn of the 20th century.
Begat in 1905, I believe?
Yeah, 1905 through 1912 with a brief resurrection in the 20s. I believe, yeah, don't quote me on this, do your own fucking research.
Yeah, come on, there's the internet.
Right? Y'all know how to learn.
Yeah,
Fuck.
you know learning. I understand that 1905 was a banner year for Mr. Winsor McCay. As often happens with people where you're like, oh, they did all this great work, and then you find out all their great shit was like compressed into like a really small time frame when they were just on fire. Apparently, later in the year was when Little Nemo started. So, Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, which was kind of his wind up, and then Little Nemo. I definitely think there's a lot to recommend both of them, and I like them as kind of companion pieces for each other. Gonna get a little hippie-ish about Nemo for a second. You mentioned Lewis Carroll, and I do think there are certain works of fiction which have their own worlds associated with them that hit something, and I don't want to try to quantify it or say what it actually is, but that's like kind of a common experience for people. So when they, even though it's like a fantasy thing, like when they read it or watch a movie of it or whatever it is, that like they feel, it feels familiar, like in a weird way, like how they say people have like kind of like ancestral memory and stuff, you know, you're like, or even just that dream state. Like I think Nemo exists in that same kind of realm as like Lewis Carroll's like Wonderland stories or the Oz stories, or what's another one? I was just thinking of another one the other day, but you know, I'm not going to think of it, so I'm not going to just sit here and go like 5 times.
Yeah. Okay, well, I would also like to point out that most of the books you mentioned did come from the era of Jungian psychology, and they all do sort of apply that type of psychology, which I have to admit, for practical purposes, as far as dealing with the human experience and helping people deal with trauma and live fulfilling lives, that is fucking garbage and horribly damaging. However, as a structural model for creating works of art that can be both personally meaningful and speak to a larger group of people, shit works.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think it's something to be said for like creating a fictional world that feels to people like they've been there before, and maybe as is maybe especially appropriate for the Rarebit Fiend and for Nemo, maybe in dreams, you know, like.
But there's also something about that is a very time and place kind of, and although most of the works we're discussing happened several generations before we were born, it still managed to speak to us.
Right.
I definitely have had conversations with people younger than myself who are not familiar with those works and don't get it as much as we do.
Okay. So we're removed from the source by a certain number of years, but maybe close enough to still lock into it, but it doesn't necessarily resonate the same way with people as you get into like younger and younger.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with methods of communication. There's a rhythm and pacing to dialogue and communication in a lot of these works that I think changed during the latter half, not even latter half, like last couple seconds of the 20th century, right. And the
MTV
what is
quick cuts,
the 21st. I'm thinking more about the ubiquity of online communication, and the transference from face-to-face and vocal communication towards a more text-based comfort system. As we were talking about before the break, in terms of his lettering and how that reads, like, I feel like in today's society that's constantly reading short bits of text, it is more confusing.
So you're saying like this is more confusing.
This would be
Winsor
more
McCay
confusing.
To
Yeah,
people who are
to
used
people.
to like short bursts of like and abbreviating things and yeah, I could see that.
Because I mean, it's a little hard to read for us,
right?
And,
so for someone,
we took cursive
20,
in school,
yeah, right? So someone maybe 20 years younger than us, how's that gonna work?
Right.
Oh yeah, one that fits in that. I don't know if you ever saw a movie called The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, which is a very problematic title.
Have I ever?
Oh, I've seen that movie. I read the book. I bought the sequel. I turned state's evidence. I believe Dr. T was maybe Dr. Terwilliger.
That sounds right.
I think it's a Dr. Zeus thing. But it is kind of like definitely like weird dream-like landscape, but kind of nightmarish, and it's like a music school. Like I think the 5,000 Fingers are lots of children being forced to practice the piano. What a fucking weird mindfuck that movie is. But it's another one of those ones when you see it, even as like a little kid, for me, there was like an odd familiarity to it. And I didn't go to music school. I didn't practice the piano. Like I didn't like there wasn't that like cut and dried kind of like, oh, I relate to this because I went to like a music, seminary or some shit. It was like no, there's something weird on an unconscious level that seemed familiar about it. Maybe that is imposed by other media. It's like you see enough things that like kind of lock you in. Like maybe the fact that Wonderland seems familiar and Oz seems familiar is because you've seen Wonderland and Oz.
Yeah.
You get
well,
bombarded
actually,
with these things.
I think we kind of inadvertently touched on this in our discussion of the first problematic strip that we discussed regarding the missionary going to Africa, and I mean, the shadow of colonialism is still very heavy upon our society, to say the least. And the explicit calling out of that at this time, on so many levels, and the parody of it, not only, the colonists assuming these people as savages, but the fact that their bureaucracy is as absurd and convoluted as the European bureaucracy that he is trying to impose upon them. I mean, that's still funny.
It is, yeah.
Still
That's
works.
the thing is, it's like I'm not sure if it's like like when we were talking about it before, we were like almost like trying to say is he assigning a value to these things, and is he saying him or he's superior to them, but it's almost more like you're all people and you're all equal, and the way in which you're equal is you're all fucking stupid.
Exactly.
And your bureaucracy is ridiculous, and your red tape is ridiculous, and the ways which you think you are important in the universe are asinine. So maybe this crusty old monocled white guy who thinks he's gonna impose civilization upon these heathens is patently ridiculous, but in the same way that this like kind of like self-important like meat inspector guy was like, well, I'm the final arbiter of the abattoir, arbiter.
The
abattoir arbiter. I'm the abattoir arbiter. Say that.
Abattoir arbiter general, Lance Blastoff.
That's me, Lance Blastoff. Abattoir arbiter. I can't even say it once.
Abattoir arbiter general.
Because I'm gonna say it 5 times fast. Well, you say it 1 time slow, Lance Blastoff. You can't.
Kids at home. Abattoir arbiter general.
Yeah, see, he can do it. You know him, right?
Extra funny because I can't pronounce ours.
Well, I can't pronounce yours. What? No. It's almost a joke. I can't pronounce ours. Well, I can't pronounce yours. Or theirs. It would be theirs. It'd be like, I can't pronounce ours. Well, I can't pronounce theirs.
Glad we worked that out.
Yeah, we worked it out. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
We're a trial run here, people. We're like Winsor McCay's lettering.
Speaking of trial runs, wow.
While you're looking for that, I will say the one thing that we talked about early on when we were talking about that particular strip with the natives and the colonizer, was it reminded us of a recent-ish news story, where there was some asshat trying to spread the, gospel of whatever the fuck, with a tribe that was notoriously not cool with having visitors, and he knew this, and they, after several visits where they shot at him, they finally shot him to death with a bunch of arrows, which seemed apt and proper.
To say the least.
His comeuppance was well deserved.
Yeah.
But it seems like this guy getting cooked in a vat of his own fat or whatever is kind of like the predecessor to that in a cartoon form.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen it. He's basically.
I'm pretty sure, considering the age of this, that we heard about that once in our lifetime.
It's probably happened.
It was probably like a thing.
Right. At some point, you're right.
This is over 100 years old.
That's true.
Context.
Yeah. So it was a thing. Colonizers just dying for being stupid was a thing. I guess that just almost goes without saying.
Yeah. Seriously, general rule of thumb: you walk into somebody's house and start being an asshole to them, you can't blame them for fucking you up.
Yeah. There's laws in some places.
Ain't there now?
Ask the NRA, they'll tell you.
Oh yeah. Anyways, so getting back to Winsor McCay's streams of Rarebit Fiend, and since we're obviously been drinking a bit, we're going to discuss this strip on page 36 about alcoholism.
Ah, subject near and dear to my liver. Thank you. I was just about to ask.
Liver?
I don't even know her. That's the sound of a drinking break, kids.
Yep.
Thank you.
Brought to you by your host, Albert Colism.
Al for short.
I'll be sure to remember that.
Al be sure does remember that. He remembers everything. It's like a mind like a steel trap. You kids love a good Al be sure joke, don't you?
So, speaking of traps, we could skip ahead to this 1906 Trap Queen over here, but we're going to try to stay on track with the alcoholism strip.
Alright, so, the wind has other ideas. You probably couldn't hear it because of our really efficient and beautiful and wonderful tactile experience windscreen. Hello, beautiful Tribble.
That they hear.
The wind just blew the book shut on us. It's like it's trying to tell us something. We got it back open.
Book shot is what you use after the duck shot.
So I don't remember exactly. I'm gonna have to look at this strip again to get so.
Likewise.
So they start. Two gentlemen having what is referred to as gentleman's bet about who can drink the most. We're kind of. I feel like we're more evolved than that.
Yeah.
We're more like, you know what? It doesn't really matter because I'm just going to offer you some of my booze, and we'll take another drinking break.
Yeah. We don't care who can drink the most, as long as everybody gets to drink.
Yes. Everybody has all the drinks.
Yeah.
So but these gentlemen are at it. And they look like quite top gentlemen as well.
Yeah, well-hatted.
Well-hatted. Well-heeled.
And well-caned.
And well-caned. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll bet you $4 I could drink more booze than you can. I'm guessing that was probably quite a extravagant wager turn of the century.
Yeah.
I mean, now it'd be like, well, I'll bet you half a beer.
About like $100 back then.
Yeah, so that's good.
But okay, maybe not that much, but
something that like these high rollers might. So
pennies were useful.
Yes, the one that gets intoxicated first loses the bet, and I don't know what their definition of lose is, but
not the same as mine.
No. So the first man says, "Waiter, bring us 30 beers and prepare to get awful busy." Now, I feel like I'm a pretty accomplished alcoholic, and
likewise.
30 beers is a lot. I mean, it's a dream, so I guess, I mean, wasn't it like something like that number of shots that killed John Bonham? And John Bonham was like he's like fucking George Foreman of fucking drinkers,
yeah. But I also don't know what 1906 beers were like. Like,
true. Was
all beer like fucking PBR? Cause
I could drink 30 beers. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. And probably so, because I feel like even like if I go back to when I was a teenager and I think
that's
what
totally
beers were
different
available.
Though. I kind of feel like my guess would be it'd be the other direction.
It'd be stronger.
Where, things went down during the 20s and 30s and lower and lower. But like at that time,
so then they might have actually been really. So 30 beers in 1905 might have been like rocket fuel. Like.
I could be completely wrong, but I'm just based on where my guesstimate of industrialization is. I think brewing was not as industrialized and watered down as it got later.
Right. So we have to take all these industrial revolutions into account.
Yeah, we're going to have to do like a fucking annotated appendices where we actually do the research.
Yeah.
Back up all the shit we're talking on this podcast.
I feel like that's not going to happen. We could annotate it, but the annotations will be pure bullocks. It'll be bullshit. Horse shit.
Won't be the first.
So he brings the rack of 30 beers to them, and as soon as he brings it, they're like, well, that's good, now hustle after 45 quarts of rye whiskey. Like, these guys are serious. Don't mope there, bring on 12 guys. This is all public domain, right? We could read the whole thing, and it's
I mean, as far as I know, like, and if not, call me out.
Right? Come on, Winsor.
Yeah.
Don't mope there. Bring on 12-gallon jugs of good stout old brandy. Be lively now. I'm kind of. What is going on with the illustrations? The bartender, the waiter, like.
Yeah, I was curious about that myself.
Is he Emmett Kelly? He really looks like. He either looks like he's minimalist blackface. Or he's
like reverse blackface, like this is proto corpse paint shit.
Right,
on
he's
here.
super white, and then he's just got like the black lips.
That spiky fucking Tri-Hawk deal.
Yeah, he's going punk as fuck.
But notice how everything extends. Like apparently, like it turns into a clown nose and a goatee with like a spike growing out of his head. Like
it does
starts
more
getting more and more like clown makeup.
He really becomes a juggalo.
Yeah, I kind of think that's intentional.
Yeah. Okay, so they're doing that. Or he's a chimney sweep who's like he's kind of dainty. He's just like just stick my nose.
No,
in.
Look at that. That is fucking clown makeup in panel 3. That triangle eyebrow.
That's goddamn clown shoes.
Okay, he
He's
has
going to
been
clown
there.
college, sure.
But
so we don't know.
This is explicitly dreams, and honestly, dreaming that your bartender is wearing clown makeup, that's not weird.
No, I think it's just par for the course with the Rarebit then.
Yeah.
You got that. You got cheese toast. You've got a clown waiter waiting to happen.
Not weird. Maybe erotic, but not weird.
Right. Maybe erotic.
Maybe.
Definitely not weird.
Not for me. Not
for somebody.
No, definitely not me.
No. That's not why I brought it up. No, you brought it up. That's not why any of us brought it up.
No, nothing came up. Moving on.
All right, so now you're talking. Bring us 9 barrels of ale. Hurry! This poor beleaguered clown chimney sweep juggalo waiter is just like, now he's bringing like he's like in the marching band. He's bringing like the big, he's bringing a keg out as like it's like a big bass drum or something. He's like, well, and now this guy's already conceded, but they're way in. He's like, I guess I lose. Waiter, have you a hose connected with a vat anywhere? Now I can relate. Now the competition is over, and he's just like, just throw the goddamn booze down my gullet.
Yeah.
I don't care who fucking wins. It's not what it's about. That's good. Can you fix up a bath with that vat? I am blur. And then it like goes to a line which maybe indicates one of them has passed out or something. And then the guy wakes up.
Yeah.
Not drinking at all. Not hanging out with the clown waiter.
40 years later, the idea of spring break would be implemented, and
chug.
this ain't shit.
It would make it would make a lot of sense. But do they have clown waiters at spring break?
They better.
Yeah. What am I paying good money for? I paid tuition for my son's college. He didn't have any fucking clown waiters. I'm not paying off that goddamn student loan. He can suck it. He can suck my clown dick. And we're there. That's where we are. You see?
And on that note, let's get into some police brutality here on page 56.
Oh, yeah.
Not the kind of police brutality that we're also accustomed to here in 2019, but fun nonetheless.
Still fun.
Still fun.
You're saying it's not as fun as current police brutality?
No,
6 of
body
1.
cameras.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one of the most searched body cameras.
Wait, just in general or just me?
Just you, General. Major issues. That was a sight gag for those of you at home. I'm not going to tell you what the sight gag was, though.
But I will tell you what a sight gag is. A sight gag is a comedic performance based on a physical motion or activity that can only be enjoyed via the sight of the audience. Hence the term sight gag.
The sight of which you have none.
And speaking of nuns.
You blind bastards. Yeah, speaking of nuns. Police brutality. Alright. The one thing about yard casting is like the sun goes down and it's like harder to read. Like we're looking at a book. We're looking at reference material because we're professionals. And it's harder to see the reference material. But, it's yeah. So these two people they're like ready to duel. One guy's got his gun out already. Now, you borrowed 30 cents from me 10 years ago. I waited long enough for its return. Now it's you! Hello, Percy. How much did you... He's not in the game yet. Like, or I so take that and that. And I think he shoots his head off. I mean, it's...
Yeah, it's just some kind of big explosion with some really quick hatching.
Oh, his head is intact in the next panel when, like... who shot you? Tell us who shot you. He's like, oh, don't bother. It's a private matter. Right. Well, you know.
Remember when all of America was Texas?
Right. You know, snitches get stitches, man. You don't want to like, oh, he shot me. Just suck it up. Man up. You got shot, just fucking stiff up a lip, right? Remember, some innocent man will suffer for this. If you don't squeal, who was it? He even says squeal in the thing. Like, he's telling him, you're going to be a snitch if you do this. So, take him to the hospital quick. Rest easy now. And it's an ichthyoplasm wound in the axillaris pluvius. I think they made that up. Well, or I think Winsor made that up. Never mind about me. It's my finish. Also, I want a cigarette. Fair enough. You know, he's like, look, he's murdered me. I'm gonna die, so that other shit doesn't matter. I would like a cigarette.
Yeah.
Let's see, are they decent enough to give him?
And speaking of cigarettes, I would also like to just point out again the age of the works we're talking about. This is pre-Bernays and pre-use of tobacco for the suffragette movement, and yeah, at this point, cigarettes were not at all what they are today.
No. Yeah, it looks like they don't give him a cigarette either, so they're right bastards.
Yeah, they're real fucking bastards.
Fucking dicks. They're like, you're gonna die, and we're gonna ask you a bunch of bullshit questions and not give you a cigarette. So
yeah.
Basically, they're like, fuck you.
Cars have barely been invented, and all cops are already bastards. What the fuck?
Well, it's not a surprise. Lodged in the below. Yeah, they're definitely making some shit up here because like the missile entered the body between the third and fourth flagellios, and it's lodged in the blazala.
Oh, right in the blazala.
Oi! It kills right in the blazala.
Is that why he's doing Fezbingers?
What is happening there? He looks like he's putting that volcano, that little model volcano from the Brady Bunch that Peter made for his science project, on the guy's face. Like he's like, and if you get any of that on the patio, Alice will kill you.
That looks like the best fucking like total immersion gravity bong experience I can imagine. And
except for the maybe being dead.
Gutting him like
he like a dead fish. Yeah, he's like, oh, are you dead? Because I'd love your spleen for my collection. He's just getting right in there. And now they're looking for a baby. It's like cresting. Like somebody's like the other guy's back there like lifting his feet up and sticking his head right in the taint.
Are those?
Yeah, are those his legs? I don't even know whose legs. They're really going after it in this.
Wow.
Be nice if you guys could see this.
Oh, they will. I mean, this is public domain, so I will be putting stills of these shots on the YouTube.
Nice. I love the YouTube. You kids love the YouTube, don't you?
Part of why I chose to explore public domain work for our first outing.
So we could actually use pictures of the shit?
Yeah, I intend to use pictures in the future by having the creators on. Anyways.
Yes. Oh, yeah. See? My little chickadee. Alright, so, I don't know where else to go with that. I mean, it's not long before he wakes up. Oh, they bring the guy in. The guy who shot him, he's like, oh, you're my friend. You shot me and I love you for it. Come and kiss me. Oh. It's like Mihir Kagri of the early 1900s. Like, that is a more dated reference than anything in this book about Winsor McCay. If you know what I mean when I say Mihir Kagri, then you're old and kill yourself. So, like I'm about to.
I don't even get that reference.
See? That was around the turn of our century. Close to it. Just prior or just after. I still want to do some like Mihir Kagri Drake Maymays, but I don't know if y'all are ready for it. Go leave it. You're gonna leave it. Leave it. Just look for those. Google that shit later.
And on that note, I think it really is time that we wrap this up.
Yeah. What do we say? Winsor McCay, basically a genius.
Absolutely a genius. We didn't even discuss about his pre-publication work, which I find fascinating to know that there was a time when live illustration was a thing, and this motherfucker honed his craft doing live illustration on people like Harry Houdini and other touring performers before being published. Like,
right, it was chalk drawings, wasn't it?
Chalk drawings, live chalk drawings.
That's astonishing during in a traveling show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what else do you need to say? I remember we were talking about that over lunch one day when we were looking at these and talking about the interesting lives that some of these artists have. Jim Steranko being one of our other favorite comic artists. And speaking of Houdini, Jim Steranko actually was an escape artist.
Yeah.
So, apropos of nothing, I'm just saying.
Except Miracle Man.
Except Miracle Man, yeah. It's like you have Jim Steranko as an escape artist before he becomes a comic book legend. Winsor McCay touring with the preeminent escape artist of all time, Harry Houdini, and doing like live chalk drawings, which who the fuck knew that was a real thing?
I didn't until I fucking did some research for this.
Yeah, and that's how you learn a craft, kids. So when people are like, stay in school, fuck that.
No.
Go on tour with the circus.
Yep.
Draw some shit with chalk. Do ayahuasca.
Just fucking do it.
Eat some Rarebit. Have some fucking crazy dreams. And thanks for listening. And remember to shut the fuck up.
And buy clothing from
seethingclutch.threadless.com. Do you want me to spell it? SEETHINGCLUTCH.THREADLESS.com.
Trust me, shit looks good on you.